Margaret needs a quilt for her daughter for Christmas. Lynette is making a memorial quilt. And Sharon is looking for the perfect coordinates for her daughter's quilt. Let's help them out. Hi, it's Fran Morgan with Fabric Café, and I'm your fabric matchmaker. Quilts are such a meaningful gift, but sometimes it's difficult to get just the right fabrics pulled together. Well, today we have 3 fabrics from participants that were chosen specifically for loved ones for gifts. We're going to help them choose the perfect matchers, the perfect pattern. Stay tuned because we have a very special slideshow at the end sharing what our previous matchmaker participants have done with their fabric. Now, our first fabric was sent in by Margaret, and this is darling fabric. We have stacks of books here, all piled on top of each other. Love that. But we have little critters tucked in here. We have a little rabbit, some squirrels, some fox. So cute. And Margaret has a very special story about why she chose this fabric and what she's going to do with it. So let's read that. Margaret writes, I recently started quilting and completed 3 quilts. My goal for 2024 is to complete a quilt for each person in my family, 4 adults and 4 children, by Christmas. I have picked out fabric and 3-yard quilt patterns for all but my oldest daughter. I am enclosing a square of fabric that fits her perfectly. She has always been an avid reader. When she was 3 years old, she would line up her stuffed animals and dolls and read books to them, making up the story as she turned the pages. She graduated from college with a BA in literature and went on to receive her MA in 18th century women's literature. When I saw this fabric, it screamed, "Buy me for Jessica." But I'm having a hard time picking just the right 2nd and 3rd fabrics and the perfect pattern to showcase this beautiful fun print. Please help me make this the perfect quilt. Well, Margaret, I think we have something amazing for you, and let's go check out the pattern, and then we'll talk some more about your fabric. Now, Margaret, we have decided to put your fabric in the dash pattern, and there's a few reasons here. We have your book fabric, which is a darling, and I know that your daughter Jessica is going to love it, and it is going to go in our number 1 block, our number 1 position here where the pink is, and this is going to work perfect because the book fabric is directional, and this quilt will take that. Now, the other thing is we have a secondary block here that can take a great directional fabric too, so that's going to work. And then we are separating all of these with a number 2 fabric. Now, your fabric is an interesting scale and it also has a lot going on. So I wanted to make sure that I chose a pattern like dash here so that we could separate our 2 and 3 so that you can really focus on your fabric. So that's part of the reason. And of course, as always, with 3-yard quilts, this is going to be super fast to make. So let's go see what we've put with your fabric. Now, your fabric does have the stack of books and the little animals, and it is directional. So it's very important to choose a pattern that can take a directional fabric, and dash is a great example of that. And not only can it take a directional in the number 1 position, it can also take a directional fabric in the number 3 position. So we have put your fabric in the number 1 position, whereas everywhere this pink square is. Now, another thing that I considered when choosing the pattern is the scale of your print. I didn't want the block to be too big, but I wanted the block to be big enough to really showcase your focus fabric, which is what dash does for us. So it's just perfect. Now, the number 2 fabric I chose is a nice beige here. And I chose this because it picks up the lighter tones in your focus fabric, which is your fabric. And I wanted to brighten the quilt up just a little bit. I didn't want it to get too dark. I wanted to keep the fun whimsy. And this number 2 fabric is perfect. It's going to go everywhere this white polka dot is here, and it's going to separate our 1 and our 3 fabrics. So it gives it that nice airy look. And when you do that, when you border your focus with a more simple print, it's going to really help your eye draw in on the focus fabric, which is very important because this is the star of the show that we want to really highlight. Now, our number 3 fabric, I have paired it with these stars and lanterns, and I think this is so cute because, you know, sometimes we read at night, you know, bedtime stories and things like that, and this is the perfect companion. It is going to go everywhere the green is, and if you can tell here, it is also directional with our little dots and lines here connecting our stars and moons and lanterns. And that will work well here, as well as our little peekaboo block right here. Now, if you notice these two fabrics, you can see how the scale of the focus fabric is a little bit larger, but the scale of our number 3 fabric is a little bit smaller, meaning the print is smaller. What this does is it gives you extra interest in your quilt. You don't just get contrast from color, you get contrast from scale. And this is a perfect example. So we have our smaller stars and moons, our little bit bigger focus with our books and our little forest animals, and then a very, very simple number 2 that frames them all out and makes it perfect so that you really focus on your books, which I think is great. So I have an image on the screen for you, Margaret, so that you can see what it's going to look like when it's made up. And it is darling. I think your daughter is going to love this. Those stacks of books with those little forest animals tucked in there is just so, so precious. And I really, really think that it's going to be such a special, heartwarming gift. And I love the way the number 2 fabric frames the 2 and 3 so well. Okay, so Margaret, for participating today, I am going to be sending you 1 yard of the number 2, 1 yard of the number 3, as well as the book Easy Peasy, which has the dash pattern in it. So thank you so much. Can't wait to see a picture of the quilt if you make it up. So before we move on, I want to talk about the quilt that is hanging behind me. This is So Quick, and So Quick is the perfect pattern for novelty prints as well. So dash is great, but So Quick is also really, really great, and it goes together so, so fast. So let's talk about the kit for everyone else, and I love it when this happens. I was able to find exactly the same fabric as Margaret had. So we have our little forest animals with our stacks of books here. We have this wonderful beige number 2 that really helps give your eye a place to rest in the number 2 position. And of course, our stars, our moons, and our lanterns that is perfect for bedtime story time. So this kit is exactly the same, and I love it. It is called Storytime, and it is the dash pattern from the Easy Peasy book. So our next fabric swatch was sent in by Lynette, and it is really a pretty swatch. We have these crosses here, 2 different colorways, with these beautiful pink suasive florals with some very positive, encouraging words in the background. We have hope and joy and love. It is really a pretty, pretty fabric. So let's see what Lynette has to say about her fabric. Lynette writes, "My sister lost her youngest daughter earlier this year. My niece's favorite color was pink, but I found this beautiful fabric in my stash. I wanted to make something of a memorial quilt for my sister using this material and somehow incorporate pink. I know it is unusual to request specific colors when you are matching fabric, but I was hoping you could help me with this. I have several of your books and love your videos. I am currently making a quilt for my brand new great-grandson using one of your patterns with fabric from my large stash of children's fabric. Your quilts are beautiful and easy to assemble." Lynette. Well, Lynette, I am so happy that you gave us a suggestion and a direction to go incorporating the pink. So let's see which pattern that we chose for you. Now, Lynette, I have chosen Elation for your fabric, and I'm hoping that this is going to make a really special quilt for your sister. We have a nice big block here on this pattern. This will allow you to really showcase your fabric, and I think your fabric is so elegant, and I think that it's going to give a lot of comfort being able to see it in all of these blocks. Now, it's also surrounded and bordered by a block that alternates between our 2 and 3, and I think I have something perfect keeping your niece in mind. So let's get it on the table and see what we have for you. Now, Lynette, I have put your fabric into the number 1 position as the focus fabric. And in the Elation pattern that I have on the table here, we have this nice big block that is going to accommodate your fabric. I like this big block for your fabric because the scale of your fabric is larger. You know, we talked a little bit about scale on the last quilt. It applies here as well. Also, your fabric is directional, so I had to make sure that I accommodated for that. And in the Elation pattern, the fabric 1 can use a directional fabric, so it's going to work perfect. Now, I've put it with a very simple beige that picks up the beige tones into some of your crosses here. and a little bit of the gold tones that are in the background in your words. That beige is going to go everywhere you see the off-white here. And I like this beige as the number 2 because it is going to give your eye that place to rest. And when we bring in our third color, it's really, really going to help that third color pop as well as focus on your fabric. So our number 3 fabric, I was able to bring in some of that pink as you really, really wanted. Now, I really thought about which pink I was going to bring in because it was very important that I kept the elegance of your fabric and some of the tones of your fabric. So your flowers on your crosses have multiple tones of pink. So I was able to pair it with this more formal fabric that has multiple tones of pink, as well as a little touches of gold that bring in the words in the background and a little bit of the gold on the crosses. Now this fabric is going to go everywhere you see the green here as well as the background. And whenever you put it in here, this fabric has just a slight direction, but once we get it on the border of our blocks, it's not going to be that noticeable. And I think it's going to work just perfect in your quilt. And I really, really do like how it brings in the golds and the pinks and the aesthetic, which I think is very important here. So I think it's going to work really, really well. I have an image for you on the screen so that you can see how this is going to come together. And I love how the crosses are just highlighted in that focal position on the Elation pattern. And I really love the way that the pink border comes together and gives you, it just brings your eye in like you're framing that, which I think is really, really important. So I hope this pattern works really well as a gift for your sister and that it brings her a great deal of comfort. So for participating today, I am going to be sending you a 1 yard of the number 2 fabric, 1 yard of the number 3 fabric, as well as the book Stash Busting with 3-Yard Quilts. This has the Elation pattern in it for you. So thank you so much, Lynette, for participating. Now, I've got a little special surprise for everyone else. Now, for everyone else, I have chosen the Fandango pattern. Now, this is a great pattern, and I'm going to explain everything in a minute and reason why I chose this. So first, let's talk about this pattern. We have 2 great blocks here. One that's bordered, and you know how super simple that is. And then we have one that we have half snowballed, which is what we like to call it, where we've done a little stitch and flip on each corner. We put these together, kind of rotating the direction of these half snowballs, and it creates this really cool star pattern that just comes together, and it's so awesome. Now, I've got some super fabric that is very reminiscent of Lynette's fabric, so let's get it on the table. Now, I was not able to find the exact fabric like Lynette had in this case, but I found something really, really beautiful. But in getting the really perfect quilt pattern and look, I wanted to change the pattern, so that's why we went with Fandango. So let's talk about this. Now, I have chosen this beautiful green and floral here for our focus fabric. Our focus fabric goes in the middle of the squares here as well as on the corners of our half snowballs. So it's really going to help highlight this beautiful print, which is not necessarily directional, so it can turn for our snowballs and things like that, so it's going to look great. For our number 2 fabric, I have found this really pretty cross fabric that coordinates with our focus fabric. It is our lightest because we're taking our focus out of the equation, comparing the next 2. Our lightest is our number 2 fabric. It is our lightest. Also, the crosses on this particular fabric are a little bit smaller in scale, so they needed a little bit smaller block than what the Elation had. And so we are putting it here in our snowball blocks, and it is going to work perfectly. It is directional, and it's still going to work. I would warn you to make sure that you make half of your snowball blocks going one direction and then half going the other direction. It's going to work perfect. And I really like this cross fabric because it has lots of different vines and doves holding olive branches and hearts and just lots of interest here. It's going to look great. We're going to see an image in a minute. Now for our number 3, we have this beautiful kind of a jade blue green kind of a texture here. You can see how beautiful it works with our focus, works beautiful with our number 2. And this fabric is going to be everywhere you see the dark blue here. That's just going to frame everything really well. We've got a little bit on the border as well, and it's going to look spectacular in the Fandango pattern with just the right scale of pattern. So let's take a look at that so that you can see what I'm talking about. And you see how those crosses work beautifully in that number 2 position in that half snowball. It just really highlights it, and then just that extra little punch, extra little vibrancy in our alternate block, that bordered block, that, you know, this is such an easy quilt to make, and it's going to go together so well with this fabric. All right, let's get you the kit information for this. It is called In Memory. It is our Fandango pattern, and it is from the Make It Modern with 3 Yard Quilts book. Now, our next beautiful fabric swatch was sent in by Sharon, and it is inspired by Monet. And as you can see here, we have a beautiful kind of a watercolor look that looks like a pond with all of the water lilies on it. Lots of colors to pull out, lots of greens and blues, a little pink, a little yellow, just so much beauty in this fabric. Let's see what Sharon has to say and why she chose this fabric. Sharon writes, "My daughter has loved the painting of Impressionist painter Claude Monet since she was a young girl. Her grandfather gave her the book Lynette in Monet's Garden. It quickly became one of her favorite bedtime stories. A few years ago, I found this fabric similar to pictures found in the bedtime favorite. This past fall, Anna, now an adult, had an opportunity to participate in a work-related seminar in France and asked me to join her for a mother-daughter trip of a lifetime. A special highlight was going to see Monet's Garden at Giverny in person. I have wanted to make my daughter a quilt using this fabric, but haven't found the right coordinating fabrics or pattern. I am hoping you will help me to make a very special quilt for my daughter. Thank you so much." Well, Sharon, I think we have something so special for you. Let's check out the pattern. So Sharon, I have chosen the Reflections quilt for your daughter, and I think it's going to be amazing. We have a nice big snowball block here where your fabric is going to go. It's going to really show it off. Then a very interesting secondary block. Now, when you put these blocks together, it creates this kind of neat pattern across the surface of the quilt. I think it is going to be so perfect for your daughter's fabric. I cannot wait to share the image with everyone. So let's get this on the table, talk about your companion fabrics, and look at that image. So for the number 1 fabric, we are using the Monet print, which is gorgeous. And that is going to go in this big area here, in the snowball block. Now, whenever I picked the companion prints, I wanted to keep the same aesthetic. I wanted to keep it in the blues so that it would keep that watery feel. But I did not start out that way. I actually started out thinking I would bring in a little bit of the raspberry. But whenever I put it with the other colors, it just dominated, and I didn't want that to happen. So whenever you have a themed quilt like this beautiful Monet pond here, make sure you kind of keep this the focus and don't pick a fabric that's going to distract too much from it. So let's step through this, as I said, and I'm going to show you an image and you'll see what I'm talking about. So our Monet is in our snowball block, like I mentioned. Then I picked a really beautiful kind of a light blue as our number 2. Now this is a little bit of a dappled print here. It's going to go everywhere you see this rusty color, pumpkin color here. And of course, we're sticking with the blues. And in our focus fabric, we have many shades of blue here, so it's going to pick up those lighter tones. Now for the number 3 fabric, I picked a darker shade of blue. And I picked a texture that looked like water to me, which I thought was keeping with the theme with all of this. So it's got the lights and the darks and the blue. It picks up the blues and the focus fabric, and it is going to be everywhere you see the black here. And what this does, keeping with all of the blues, we still have our lights and darks, we still have our textures, but because these do not have distinctive prints, it's going to keep your eye going to the Monet print, which is what we want. And also, I really thought that the pattern reflections worked well for this because once we put it in this fabric, and you're going to see in a moment, it looks like, I think, a a nice koi pond or a nice pond that would have those kind of lily pads in it and has that wonderful, wonderful feel. So let's look at that now, and you can see Sharon's fabric here in the reflections pattern, and that Monet print really stands out in that snowball. And I love how all the watery colors of the blue frame it out nicely. It does not distract from it. It keeps your focus on the focus, which is the whole goal. So I really, really liked the way this turned out. I think it is just gorgeous. Sharon, I hope your daughter loves it as much as I do. Now for participating today, Sharon, I will be sending you 1 yard of your number 2, 1 yard of your number 3, as well as the book Stash Busting with 3-Yard Quilts that has the reflections pattern in it. Now let's see what Sharon has inspired for everyone else. Now I am so excited that I get to say this again. I was able to find the same fabric, which is wonderful because this print is truly gorgeous. I mean, it is inspired from a classic artist, which of course we know we all love, and it is so peaceful. So once again, we have this beautiful Monet print for our focus, the number 2 fabric in the beautiful light blue, and the number 3 in the wonderful watery dark navy blue that coordinates so well with our focus fabric. So the name of this kit is called Monet's Garden. The pattern is Reflections, and it is from our Stash Busting with 3-Yard Quilts book. Now I want to give a special shout out to some of our previous participants because they have done an amazing job making up their quilts from the fabric selections that we provided. So the first one I want to share with you is Laura. She was in episode 3, and she made the It's a Snap pattern. Now her fabric was in position 3 because it was the darker of the 2 companions, and it turned out amazing. I love the bold pop in the focus fabric. Yours coordinates so well. It looks so good, Laura. Good job. Our next participant is Karen. She was from episode 18, and she sent in this really fun Dr. Seuss Christmas fabric, which I just loved. We put that fabric in the town square pattern with a red and a white kind of fun print, and it turned out great. What a great Christmas fabric. Good job. Way to go, Karen. And then lastly, I would like to shout out to Carla. She was in episode 19, and she made this gorgeous quilt. Her fabric is in the number 3 position, and wow, what a beauty. It turned out fabulous. Carla, great job. I really, really appreciate the photo. And what a beautiful quilt you have. Now, if you have participated in Matchmaker in the past and you have your quilt made up, I would love to see a photo and share it with all of our other viewers. You guys are such an amazing quilters, and you inspire me so much. So be sure to send your pictures to matchmaker@fabriccafe.com. Thanks everybody today for participating and for watching our show. It is Fran Morgan, your fabric matchmaker.